2, 1, and we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Will Talk. Hello, Brittney. How are you?
Hey Fred, how are you? I'm good.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm wonderful. Thank you very much. So let's get straight into it. You called this episode "Is
Yeah.
your asset? Sorry, is your disability an asset or a liability?" Great question. What do you think?
It's funny because I'm still running with that scar experiment thing that we've talked about in like the previous two episodes. And it's really just like making me think about everyday things. And I've had this sort of like notion for a very long time that my disability is an asset to me. Um, and so I thought I would just share some cool experiences that I've gotten over the last couple of years. Actually, just cool experiences in life that I attribute to my disability, that I would never, ever have gotten had I not had a disability. And obviously, we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't go back in time, live our life as an able bodied person, and know whether our life would have been drastically better or drastically worse. So, we can't play that game. But I like to think that my disability is an asset. Just as an example, a friend of mine started a talent agency specifically for people with disabilities because at the time, he was dating somebody whose daughter had a disability. They're since not together. And actually, the mom took over the talent agency because her daughter has the disability and it just made more sense for her to continue running it. But when they started it, I was asked to be on their roster. And I never in a million years would have ever thought of myself as like an actress or a model or anything like that. Just never really would have done that. It wasn't in my sort of like repertoire of things that I thought would be in my future. And so I was just like, I'm kind of awkward in front of like the camera. I'm kind of not photogenic at all, which if you see pictures of me, it's terrible. Like I have to really try to not look like total crap in a picture. And so I was like, I don't know whether you really want me on your roster. And they were like, just, we're just starting this. So we just want, a bunch of people with disabilities that we think are outgoing. And I was like, okay. So I said yes. And then I got jobs, which is like really interesting. So, and
What sort
last
of
year,
jobs? Were they like
so
modeling jobs?
yeah, so I started with like some modeling jobs that were for events in our local area. And so they were like showcasing the accessibility of the events for next year. So I got to attend the event for free and get my picture taken doing some of the things at the events. I'm trying to think of all of the like actual modeling things that I've done, but we modeled for like a clothing agency or a clothing designer here. So yeah, I've done a couple of modeling things, which to be truthful, I don't really like being in still camera like video or bleh, photos. It's odd being trying to pose when they're taking still photos because how do you change your poses? It's just weird.
Yeah.
Um, and then I got a Walmart commercial, and I don't even know where it is. So if anybody's ever seen me on any Walmart anything, because they've renewed it, and I've never seen it.
What were you
So
doing in the commercial, in the Walmart commercial?
I was I was wearing pajamas,
Oh,
so I had to
really?
wear pajamas and pretend to be getting ready for like an event. So I was like holding up dresses, like looking at them, and
Did you play the role of an able-bodied person or a disabled person?
no, I was in a wheelchair. Like the reason that
Oh,
I've
right.
gotten these jobs is because the agency is a inclusive talent agency to showcase diversity in media. So anybody, not always, like they'll send me things that are just like a show that's a person, and you don't have to be a disability or not disability. They just say it's open to anybody, including disability. So the role might not necessarily be somebody with a disability, but usually when brands hire somebody from one of these inclusive agencies, they're looking to showcase like diversity, which is like interesting because the Walmart, commercial shoot for it was not wheelchair accessible at all. They hadn't thought of a bathroom for me. They hadn't thought I couldn't get in the hair and makeup trailer on my own. The vehicle
Wow.
that picked me up, I couldn't get in. It was a giant van. The house was not wheelchair accessible. They didn't think of like where I was going to go to the bathroom for the day. It was ridiculous. So I was like, okay, so Walmart wants to showcase inclusivity kind of, but don't actually pay attention to it when they're actually doing the media stuff. But Walmart hires like a production company to do their
Mm.
like commercials. So it might just be the production company that didn't think about it. But anyway, so that's like a very cool opportunity that I got that I never would have gotten had I not had a disability. I believe that my very first job ever as a camp counselor at a university science and engineering camp, I believe that I got the job because I was in a wheelchair. And I think that they wanted somebody with a visible disability to showcase just diversity when they're doing workshops and stuff like that for kids in schools. So I think that in my case, specifically, having a disability has been a major asset. I think I'm more noticeable. But it wasn't always that way. For a long time, I believed that my disability was a liability. And specifically in my first teaching practicum, I would call myself a whiner. And when my what's she called? I'm trying to think of what the teacher is called that is like supervising you. She sat me down and was trying to explain how when I was writing my own assessment, I was pointing out all of the ways that my disability was a liability instead of saying how I would be overcoming these, like, this might be something that I would find difficult, but here's all the solutions that I found for it. I was basically just pointing out how the school made it difficult for me and like all these things. And at the time I thought she was just being horrible to me.
Oh,
and
really?
then, yeah, it was like, I was pregnant at the time and I didn't know it. So I might have been slightly emotionally unstable.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, so I wasn't always, seeing the world like I see it now. But once I started to believe that my disability was an asset, I started experiencing that. And I think that's what the SCAR experiment was trying to explain, that whatever you believe is what you're going to experience. And whatever you choose to believe is the thing that you're going to see out in the world. So yeah, in my case, it's been an asset. But I wanted to ask you the same question to see if there were times that you believed it was a liability, and has your perspective changed? And then maybe people could weigh in the comments to talk about whether they believe their disability has been a major liability in getting jobs or things like that. So,
well, I think I want to probe a little bit further into yours first before I go into
okay.
mine, because you say that your disability is an asset, but do you think that it's been both? Like, do you think at sometimes it's opened up opportunities for you and some doors it's closed? Do you think it's been both?
Yeah. I definitely think it's been both, especially like in like the film industry kind of thing. There's way less opportunities in general for somebody with a disability, mostly because people with disabilities aren't in the TV and film industry. And so there's less actual value to be found in our community because there's less people that have the skills to go into those roles, right? So I think that's partially the problem, but there's less opportunities, but the ones you get, I think, are easier to clinch. Like if you go into the audition, there's less people applying and less people auditioning, so they're easier to get. But
do you think it's a little bit like the Paralympics? Do you think it's like if you're fit and you get injured, it's easier to win the Paralympics than like, the entire human race? You only got to beat the people that are disabled. That sounds really, I blurted that out without thinking about it. But sometimes I think I've probably got a much better chance in a Paralympic sport than I would an able-bodied sport. I don't really excel athletically, but like, like a wheelchair sports, I could excel in. Do you know what I mean? That sounds really weird. But
no, I think that's true. I think it's true. I
Yeah.
think you're spot on there because, and this is going to be like, me stereotyping people with disabilities, but there are a lot of people who struggle just to relearn how to live a very basic existence after they become injured. And I think the people who rise above, who have a positive mindset, who live believing that they are still valuable to society and try kind of thing, I think there's less of those than maybe in like able-bodied population, because it's way easier to rise above when you have less challenges, right?
Yeah.
So I think statistically speaking, there's going to be less sort of outliers that really rise above and succeed. And I think that's, sadly true for the disability community.
Also, in the film industry, if there was a role for a paraplegic, an able-bodied person could easily play that role, and like wouldn't happen, vice versa.
Yeah, that's another thing that I was talking about actually with Joe recently, because I was like, why can't somebody with a disability just apply for a role? Like if it says like bank teller or lawyer, why can't they just apply? And he was like, well, it really probably would depend on what the script looks like, if there was a lot of like things that they had to do physically. But I don't really see why that couldn't be, but the same sort of like flip side is that like, it doesn't matter what physically somebody that's able-bodied has to do if they're playing a person in a wheelchair, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think it's easier. It's just, and I like the sorry, I'm not being articulate today, I'm tired. I think it's easier for somebody to play somebody that's disabled, that's already an actor, because they have the talent. That's one thing that I found out. I have a new respect for people that are actors, because it is really hard to act and to be convincing about it, and to just look natural. It's really hard.
There was a movie like fairly recently. When I say, in fact, when I say fairly recently, I think probably in the last 5 years. But there was a famous lady who was in a wheelchair, and I can't remember what it was about. But I do remember in the disabled community, people were like, "Why didn't they get a disabled person to play that role?" And I thought, well, it's obvious, because for the first half of the movie, she wasn't disabled. Like, and people were actually arguing that they should have CGI'd it. And I was like, what the hell? Like, surely it's so much easier. So the disabled person like can't like play the able-bodied parts. So you'd obviously get like this able-bodied lady, quite a famous lady. I can't remember what it was. She played the role brilliantly. She like had spasms in her legs. And I remember thinking, well, that's a really accurate, like, acting of like leg spasms.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, it was quite cool. But it was.
Are you
It was,
talking about? Sorry.
no, I think go on. What do you think it's called?
I was just gonna say, were you talking about the movie where she like got the bird?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I think that like, I don't know. And then she like, yeah, I watched that movie. It was really, she did a really good job. It was a
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good movie. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of the name just so that we can like talk about it. But it's the girl, she was like in Jurassic Park.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of her name, but she's like the girl in like the original Jurassic Park. She's been in like lots of the Jurassic Parks. I think that's her anyway. But she did a really good job. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was my point. But then getting back to your original question, yeah, I think my disability has been an asset and a liability. I think mostly an asset, because I think it all depends on like the way you view it. Like I view my life through quite like a rose tint. So I'm like pretty stoked about my life, and I do definitely think it's an asset, but it's definitely held me back from things. Yeah, I mean, I could go into more detail really, but I definitely think it's been more of an asset than a liability. But there's a certain grey area there. It's opened doors and it's closed some.
Do you have a specific example of when it's been an asset?
Yeah. So, okay. Sometimes I feel a little uncomfortable talking about this, but my accident benefited me financially, which is something that makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but it's also held me back from positions that I've applied for because I couldn't get up the stairs, or logistics, or just they just didn't want to employ someone in a wheelchair. So, it's given me the opportunity not to work, which is a real luxury, which I don't take for granted.
Oh, did we just lose Fred, or did my internet crap out? Can somebody please tell me if they can still see me?
Oh, I'm back in the room.
Oh, you're back. Okay. I was like, is it, I thought mine was my internet maybe.
Where did I get up to?
You were talking about how you have the ability not to work, but that you have lost jobs.
Yeah. So basically, to sum it up, I feel like I've almost like hit early retirement, which can be a gift and a curse. It's like, the government give me money, which is I'm really grateful for. It is really nice, but there are certain opportunities that aren't available to me anymore. But overall, life's good, man. I don't have any complaints, but I think that's also to do with my outlook and just I'm very satisfied with where I am.
Yeah, and I think that's I think your perspective of whether, or anybody's perspective of whether your disability is an asset or a liability is the extent to which you are satisfied with the parts of your life that you can still participate in. Do you know what I mean? Because there's some people that might not be satisfied with the areas of their life that they still have the ability to participate in. Maybe they have shitty relationships, or they don't have a lot of family support, or, the hobbies that they used to have, they're really struggling to find new ones. So I think those of us that have some sort of semblance of self-identity that still remains, and that can allow us to feel gratitude for the parts of our life we can still participate in, I think maybe it's easier for us to see our disability as an asset rather than those people who have lost so much of their identity and are really struggling to build it back up, and all of the things that, they were satisfied with that they could do, they've kind of lost. And I think that's partially anybody. Like I'm more satisfied now and feel that my asset or my disability is more of an asset now, the more confident I've gotten as a person with a disability, the more capable I am as a person with a disability. Because for years, like I said, I've talked about this a lot on my channel and in other things. I couldn't do anything for myself for 5 entire years. Like I couldn't pee, I couldn't transfer, I couldn't dress, I couldn't do anything. And so obviously I didn't feel as happy about my disability then, and I probably wouldn't have said it was an asset even when I was in university, and I was still really confused about how to ask for things that I needed, advocate for myself, all of those things. Then I saw my disability as a liability. So there's probably a lot of things that go into the positive mindset piece of it, but definitely circumstances, support, all of those things play a role.
Yeah, I guess if you could, I could look at my life through a totally different lens and be like, it's really shit because I can't go biking, I can't snowboard anymore. Like, there's so many doors that have closed for me. And I guess some people do look at their life through that lens. I guess I don't know. I think because I'm quite grateful, I'm quite just a generally happy chappy. Yeah, it's just, and also I think it would be different if I was struggling in a different way, like either like financially or like mentally, or if I had, or physically, even more physically. Like I have to also admit that my disability, I've come to terms with it so much. It's like a breeze now. It's just my everyday life, and people still think of me as an inspiration, and I've overcome loads of stuff. And although I do admit I've gone through a huge period of personal growth, which I wouldn't give up, that was really great. It's just every day now, like when I my new normal is just dealing with paralysis. So yeah, I guess I've got it kind of easy as well, especially because I've got a low level injury, incomplete, so yeah, there's a lot of other people that I think, again, in fact, they come to terms with their disability as well, no matter like what level it is. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's both. It's opened up a lot of opportunities. Certainly, like the people I've met in rehab, like you and me starting this podcast, we wouldn't have done that before. I don't think I'd have even started a podcast. I used to listen to the Wheels to Walking podcast, which was between Andrew Deitch and Richard from Wheels to Walking, and I used to love that so much, that banter between them. That's like what made me want to start my podcast with Benji. And yeah, there's been loads of opportunities that have come my way because of my, that fork in the road. But there's, like I say, a bit of both.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. And as long as you can see the majority of your life as it being an asset, then I think you're generally happier. But I also think, like the scar experiment, that you have to choose to see that, because if you constantly focus on like the bad things, then it's, it's like being lucky or unlucky. Some say I'm unlucky because I was paralyzed, and so I think I'm lucky because I was paralyzed and I'm a paraplegic. I was paralyzed in Canada, where we have universal healthcare. I have like huge family support. I didn't die. Like I pick all these reasons that I am lucky instead of unlucky. And I think it's just one of those things. But very unique opportunities that have come up with my disability. And I never would have, like you said, I never would have started a YouTube channel ever, because I can't say for sure, but I'm so glad that I'm able to have a platform now that is helpful and that I feel good about. Because there's plenty of people that I think start platforms, but I feel like
my social media feed as well. Like I follow loads of people with disabilities now. So like I like wheelchair stuff, and it's like really interesting because before I didn't really know much about wheelchair stuff, but now like, you see like a certain wheelchair and you're like, oh, that's a cool wheelchair, and like all the toys and stuff. So it's quite an
Yeah.
interesting community to be a part of. I never thought I'd be in the disabled community, but it's nice to feel part of a community. I guess that's maybe a little harder outside, just being a regular able-bodied person.
Yeah, exactly. I think it definitely changes like what you experience in the world and what you find interesting or what you notice. It's just like even like disability accessibility. Like I never would have even noticed that stuff before. I just want to highlight this comment here. It's more important than the I'm sorry, that the disability portrayal is good because I have almost never seen paralyzed people being portrayed in a positive way in media compared to people with another disability. That is like a huge thing in media. There's sort of like a trend in especially movies that being paralyzed is sad, and
Mm.
there's ones that perpetuate it a lot. Like if anybody's ever seen Million Dollar Baby, where she's paralyzed and she asks her coach to help her commit suicide because she can't do it herself, and he helps her die.
Mm.
In the You Before Me or whatever movie, I didn't even watch it because I was like so pissed at the end that he basically says like, you'll live a better life without me, and then like makes his girlfriend who loves him like break up with him because there's things like that are poor portrayals of life with a disability, and that just perpetuate the stigmas that disability is something to be pitied, and that our lives are terrible. And that's why people who meet us find us inspirational, because they're like, oh, your life is horrible and you have such a positive outlook with a horrible existence, right? Which is like, it's so funny because I've said this to many people before. I'm like, my life is harder than yours in a lot of ways, but it doesn't feel hard every day because you get used to the things that you have to do that are hard. It's like I look at people who have more than 2 kids and I'm like, holy shit, I don't know how you even survive the day. And my neighbor has 8 children. I don't know how she makes dinner
Whoa.
for all those people. I do not know how she physically birthed all of those human beings, let alone pays for them. Like they all have to go to college. Like that seems crazy to me. I don't know how people do that. And yet she doesn't know how I can live with a disability, right? We just don't know how to experience the hard things that other people experience. And so we find it inspirational, right?
Yeah.
And I do think media definitely portrays the hard part of disability a lot instead of the overcoming adversity and it being just your new normal. Like the hard things you have
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
are just your new normal.
Do you ever get inspired by disabled people still? Because I saw something recently,
That's a good
and it
question.
was, yeah, it was just like a group of lads that were going biking on their bowheads, and they made this really cool edit. And I was just like, I guess they run like a kind of bike shop. I can't remember what they were called actually. It was on Instagram. I was like back on Instagram and on the scroll, and I was like, "Wow, these guys are cool, man!" I was like, I really digged it. I was
Yeah.
just like, "Oh, they look like such a cool bunch of lads that I'd love to hang out with and go biking with." Like, and I was really inspired by them. I guess they were just doing things that I would love to do, like have that sort of sense of purpose, being in like a little community with other like, cool guys in wheelchairs that just go on
Yeah.
on adaptive bikes. I was like, oh, I'd love a crew like that. That would be so cool. I feel like a
Yeah.
little isolated, like being like the only wheelchair guy.
Yeah, I'm often inspired by people with disabilities, but I'm inspired by just human beings in general. So I wouldn't say that like I'm inspired more often by somebody with a disability. I think it's the person with the disability that inspires me, and I think that should be for everybody in general. And I always say that when somebody is inspired by me, don't say you're an inspiration because you have a disability. Say you're an inspiration because this, and this. Like if you can articulate why you think somebody's an inspiration, then it's a huge compliment because you can say like, I saw you wheeling around in the gym and you're working out and it must be really hard to use this equipment or something when it's not totally accessible. Like if somebody's really articulated to me why they think I'm an inspiration, then I totally take it as a compliment. But if somebody's just like they see me getting out of the car and they're like, you're an inspiration, then I'm just like, then it's dumb. So I think the same thing for other people. And I think just in general, I'm inspired by people who have a resilient spirit. And it doesn't matter whether they have a disability or not. So occasionally I'm inspired by people with disabilities, but I'm also just inspired by
Who
human
else?
beings in general.
Who else inspired you this week?
Oh, I'm trying to think of like, does anybody know who Jelly Roll is?
I'm giving you a segue into your video.
Into my video? Oh, totally. I was like not thinking that at all. Okay.
She
That was
swings, she misses. I
I
was like,
totally missed that. Okay, well,
who else is it?
my son inspired me this week. Oh my God, that's so funny. I'm like trying to think of like, I thought I was trying to think of like celebrities or something. Shows how much we like think, people are talking about like just individuals in life. But I'm not, that's not a joke. Like my son totally inspired me this week. He has fought a number of boxing fights. He's in competitive boxing, which is extremely hard, which we'll get into after this conversation. Hard
On
for
a
me to
learning
watch.
streak, I heard.
Yeah, so he was on a learning streak, which I talked about before, and he finally won a boxing fight. And it's like amazing to watch your kid fall down, get in the same ring again, literally like get punched, and just do it all over again. And it's so cool. So I actually have a little video here to show you guys sort of what his boxing fights look like, just so that you can see what I have to experience. So I'll add that. And he's in the blue.
Oh, he's in the blue.
Can I play this? No. How do I play this? I don't know if I can play it.
Oh dear.
It's a video. How did you add the videos?
I just added the video.
Like you could just add a video? Hang on.
Yeah.
I'm going to quickly see if I can do this.
All right, yeah, no worries.
Oh, video file. I can just add a video. Okay, well,
yeah,
I'm
you
going
can
to
add a
do
video.
this really quickly.
Yeah, no worries. I'm excited to see Jacob box.
I just don't know how I feel like the sound is really annoying. I'm going to like turn the sound down.
Oh, yeah, nice. Yeah, that must be odd watching your son get punched in the face.
It's horrible. I hate it.
Does he win?
He wins, yeah.
Oh, nice. Does he win on points or does he knock him down?
He wins on points.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's a little bit of the boxing fight, but
the other kid looked bigger.
The other kid was taller, not necessarily bigger. That they have to be within 10 pounds of each other, otherwise they can't fight in the same weight class. But the one thing that's really interesting with boxing is you can't, like, the height doesn't matter. So somebody could be really short and stocky and heavy, and one person could be really tall and thin, and they still have to fight. So it's interesting watching kids that are different heights, because the short kid has less reach. So in order to get close enough to punch the person, they have to come within the strike range of the other opponent. And so but once the other short kid gets in, then the guy with the long reach can't punch anymore because his arms are too long. So it's really funny sort of watching the dynamics of the boxing fight. But anyway, yeah, like it's inspiring to see anybody in a combat sport. I thought I would hate combat sports, and I really still get stressed out about it because you see people get hurt, right? Not badly, obviously. There's points that they're trying to gain hitting or landing the punch certain places, and they can't be like dirty. If they do something dumb, they'll get disqualified, and there's a doctor there. So, but you still see people bleed and all of that stuff. And after the fight, they just like hug, like these two guys that were right before Jacob's fight. They were punching so hard, and like they looked like they were going to kill each other. And then they were so tired by the end of round 3, and the bell rang, and they just like fell into each other and were like embracing. And I'm like, what is this? Like they were just killing each other. And then they're like, oh my God, that was such a good fight. And I'm like, it's so weird. But yeah, it's super inspiring to watch.
You should watch Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz.
Yes, yeah.
They batter each other for like 15 minutes, covered in blood. They're so tired at the end, and then they just hug it out. And it's crazy. Like it was a wild fight. But do you watch UFC at all?
Not really. I used to watch it like way back in the day. But yeah, I don't really watch it now.
You'd be happy that Jacob's just doing boxing and not like MMA. It's like absolutely brutal.
And they like changed the rules now. Like they changed some like really important rules now that I think are really gross, and it just makes it a more violent sport. So yeah, I don't watch it for I just like think it's violent. I think it's more violent. Like boxing,
Yeah, of
uh,
course.
it's
That's the thrill of it, Brittany. As a
I
man,
know.
you're like, oh my god, these guys can kick each other, grapple each other, choke each other out. You know, like knock each other out, and then just repeatedly punch them in the face while they're on the floor. It is wildly entertaining. It's like, yeah, it's like watching a car crash. I love it.
Yeah, it totally is. And I used to, like I said, I used to watch it. Um, but I have a hard enough time watching my own kid. You should have seen like I shake so bad when I get adrenaline like running through my body. The way it metabolizes it is through my muscles. So some people they like have diarrhea or something. Some people metabolize adrenaline through their intestines and some people through their like skeletal muscles. So I'm
Yeah.
always just like shaking until his fight's done. And the fight right before him was those guys that were like brutally beating the crap out of each other. Such a good boxing fight. Like they were so great. But I was like just shaking. My face was so red. Like my mother-in-law was there and I was like, is my face red? She was like, a little bit. You're like beet red. It was crazy. But yeah, I don't know. And I'm like, I have PTSD. Like, this is the other thing that I wanted to talk about with the fight. I seriously am like, I try my best not to let my fears about my injury and other people's injuries that I know sort of cloud my view of like what my kids should be allowed to do because honestly, like I know somebody who was paralyzed skydiving. I know somebody that was
Mm,
paralyzed by a rogue wave in Africa. I know somebody that was in like a motorbike accident, a dirt bike accident, a ATV, like a quad accident, car accidents, work accidents, tobogganing. Like I
mm.
literally know so many people in wheelchairs. And it's really hard for me not to let all of those like what could happen freak me out about what probably will happen because
Yeah.
I don't even I always go to Jacob's fights because I'm like scared that something's going to happen. I missed one fight when I went to that piano thing
Mm.
that we talked about a while ago and I was so stressed out the entire time because I was just like what if
Really?
he gets hurt? What if he gets hurt? And so I'm trying to not let that be a part of my parenting, but it's super friggin' hard.
Yeah, I guess it must be your natural instinct as a parent to protect your child and yeah, letting them do things that you want them to also live a full life, you know. You're entitled to do boxing. You should be able to, you know, if you want to get punched in the face, that's your choice. But at the same time, you're like, "Oh, that's, you know, I gave birth to you. I've invested
Mhm.
a lot in you, mate. So take care." Yeah, I can imagine that must be a bit of a challenge.
It is. It's like pride and fear at the same time. Like I'm so proud of Jacob for doing that. Jamie was in competitive cheerleading last year too, and she was a flyer. So she was like getting thrown up in the air and all
Whoa,
that stuff. And so
really?
yeah, so
How
I'm
did that
like,
make you feel?
no, not good. I
That's
was
worse than
more,
boxing.
yeah, I would think I know. And it was like, yeah, it was just my kids always seem to pick like the craziest crap to do.
Yeah.
Um,
I can
it's just
imagine
really
seeing
hard.
your daughter get thrown in the air. You'd be like, "Oh my God, like, don't drop her," you know, like that could
Yeah.
be, yeah.
And
Oh,
she
yeah.
she
Yeah, go
fell
on,
a few
sorry.
times. I was just gonna say she
Uh,
fell a few times, and I was always like, "Oh my god!" But she was always okay.
Changing the subject slightly, I've been on Insta, I've been back on Instagram on the scroll, and
Mhm.
they've been putting videos up of like people dying. Like, have you seen that? Like,
No.
yeah, it's like this page only posts people dying, and it's like they'll have like someone doing like a motocross jump or something
Oh
really
my
bizarre, and then
god.
they'll just like, and then it'll just say RIP, and I'm like, what the hell? This is Instagram. I like, it was
Oh
so
my
weird.
god.
Yeah, yeah.
Why?
I don't know, but it was really weird. And like you see people falling awkwardly, and then their like limp bodies just like go away, and you're like, oh my god, like that's gross, man. Like this is Instagram. I thought there's no like, you know, this is going to be violent. You know, do you want to see graphic content? It's just here you go in your face as you're scrolling. I was like, oh. So
Oh
yeah, it was pretty gross. That's why
yeah,
like
that's
when I think about like like dropping a child on the floor, it makes me think of like the weird things I saw. Like when you see like limp bodies like rolling, like you're like, oh, gross. It's
ugh,
like it's a bit more visceral, like because normally we're shielded from those graphic like
yeah.
scenes. Oh, that's really weird.
Yeah, I think I have like I don't want to see any of that stuff. Like I watch things on like sex trafficking and stuff, and now I'm like ruined for life because I make Jamie text me when she walks to school, like the minute she gets to school, like, are you at school? And I'm always like, don't walk in the back alley. Like, I'm just like so freaked out about that stuff. And then you hear, like, I just was like listening to a statistic in the United States that like 392,000 kids are missing and thought to
Whoa.
be like taken across the Mexican border for like sex trafficking and child trafficking and stuff.
Jesus.
And I'm going like, oh my God. So like, I hate listening to that stuff, which is why I hate the news. I hate any of that stuff. And like Joe always thinks that I'm like just like putting my head in the sand and ignoring all the things that actually exist. But I also know like my level of tolerance for that kind of stress inducing information and how it's going to affect my life. And especially when you don't have any, you have a level of control. Obviously you can mitigate risks in certain ways. Like I tell Jamie, don't walk alone down a back alley or something. Always stay in a area where you're visible and all that stuff. So you can mitigate those risks. But like at the end of the day, how do you control every little outcome in the world? You don't. And so those things just make it hard for me to exist in life. And I can't do it. Even myself, like I went to my parents who moved to a big acreage, 120 acres. So they have like quads and stuff like that.
Wow.
And I was riding with my dad, and my Jacob was riding on a quad behind, and like we were going up some hills and stuff. Like that stuff is so anxiety inducing to me. And like my brother is just like burning around like nothing. And I don't know how to not experience that fear. I don't know.
It's weird because when you say quad bikes, I remember like a very awful video of a guy just like getting flipped over and the quad bike just landing on him. And I'm just like, again, just scrolling. I'm like, oh, dude. And then it just comes up. Yeah, this guy died. I'm like, what? Like, it's really weird. Like no age restriction. You just scroll past it. And it just, this page only displays people dying. It was really weird. Anyway, I wanted to like move on from that because it's a bit gross. But I got a really cool comment I wanted to address from Sophie Oliver. Did you ever find entering the workplace after paralysis difficult? I'm currently in that predicament and struggle to find experience alongside school. Well, that is a great question, Sophie. And I definitely think I used to be a chef before my injury. So I was like, going around the kitchen, and something that I can still cook at home, but something I couldn't do commercially. So after paralysis, I got my first office job, and it wasn't hard, but it felt like a brave step to like get out there and apply for something that is essentially quite easy, like emailing. I work for a transfer company, so they do transfers to and from the airport. It's replying to emails, answering the phone, stuff like that. And it's a really lovely little work environment. And it's something that's quite rewarding and I really enjoy it. But was it hard? Well, yeah, because I also had the experience of applying for other jobs, which I couldn't get just because they were on the first floor, for example, and my wheelchair wouldn't go up the stairs. Someone just said they didn't want someone in a wheelchair, even though it was an office-based job, which was tough. And I would say returning to the workplace after paralysis has been very rewarding, but it wasn't necessarily difficult, but like it does take, I was scared to do it, like I was scared to like go back, but it was very, very rewarding. What was your experience, Brittney?
Well, for me, because I never had a job before I was paralyzed, because I was only 13. So I think in a lot of ways, I believe we've had this conversation before. I don't know if we have had this conversation before, whether it's better to be paralyzed younger or older. But I think for me, I could go into the area that I wanted to sort of pursue, knowing which parts of it could be accessible. And so I haven't really had any challenges finding work as a person with a disability, because I've always really liked kids. And I think I was really lucky that I wanted to be a teacher before I was paralyzed, and I still wanted to be a teacher after I was paralyzed. I actually wanted to be a doctor for a really long time. So that I didn't pursue that as heavily as I should have, I guess, because I thought I couldn't do it. Mostly because I got pregnant in university and I didn't think I had the stamina to maintain the studies, but also because I wasn't sure what that would look like in a wheelchair. But I wanted to be a teacher before anyway, and working with children and in a setting with children, I believe it's more likely to be wheelchair accessible. And I think that the image, especially now with like inclusivity and stuff like that, that workplaces have allowing people, diverse sort of groups of people to be employed, I think it's beneficial for me. So yeah, I've always worked at like a library, or I've like done tutoring. I've tutored students. I've worked as like study buddies for different age groups, like when I was in university, and then I was a camp counselor. And then I actually ran a nonprofit for a long time called the Tetra Society. So I was like the manager sort of that for a long time when my kids were little, um, and then I became a teacher. So
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I guess so you don't really have the perspective of being able-bodied as an adult looking for a job. I
no, and
guess,
not like where
yeah.
you had a career that was very able bodied, and then you
Mm.
had to try to find something else.
Yeah, I guess, but then I would never have had the experience of working in a nice office, and then
Yeah.
like being always on the side of like, so I've done lots of different jobs. I worked in construction. I was working with tower cranes. I was working all sorts of like manual labor work jobs kind of thing. So when like the drivers come in and it's
Yeah.
snowy and there's like they've got all their snow on the boots and the big jacket, and I'm like, oh, I used to be one of those guys, like doing the outdoor jobs, and
Yeah.
now I'm like, tickling the keyboard, sipping a cup of tea in the nice warm office, and I'm like, oh, this is what it's like to be in the office. And I don't think I'd have ever gone into an office without being paralyzed first. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a cozy job. It's still tough, sometimes when it gets a little bit busy, but it's a different kind of stress than
Mhm.
like physical exertion. So
Yeah, which I think is part of like the gratitude thing that you always talk about. Just really seeing having the gratitude for the new experience that you would never have had you not been paralyzed. Because some people might see that as an abysmal, like they're just like, oh, this is awful. I just want to. They have like the FOMO of all the stuff they're missing instead of being like, oh, this is a really cool new experience, and I'm gonna learn what this is like, what this sort of part of the job is like.
mm.
But yeah.
It's interesting if someone like who had like a high level injury would be like, oh, I could give you a full working body, but you'd have to do like manual labor 12 hours a day, like really hard. Would you be like, yeah, amazing, I'll do that because you've had the experience of being paralyzed? Or would you, after a while, you'd be like, oh, crikey, this is hard work, like maybe, I don't know. That was kind of like what I was
Yeah.
getting at earlier, like where I had like a full life before. I'm like comfortable. I don't really do a lot, but like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have to do a lot either. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get it. It's hard to know what your choice would be if given the choice, if that was even a possibility, right? Because
Mm,
at this point, you don't think about it, you just accept what you're still able to do and do it. But if somebody was like, you could go do this like physical thing, would you take it? I don't know. I have a really hard time with that because I really enjoy my life. And even though there are clear challenges and barriers that I face in society and in my own life, I don't know that if I had the choice, I would ever trade the life I currently have for one that I don't know. Do you know what I
mm.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you reckon if you could take like like someone who's like a slave and then be like, hey, listen, would you rather continue being a slave or would you like to be like a financially fluid paraplegic? They might just be like, oh, well, that's actually looks fine. Yeah. What do you have to do? Like just stick a tube up there and yeah, okay. Like
Yeah.
I'd probably like yeah, you know what I mean? So that's kind of yeah, that's what I think I was getting at. There's worse things than being disabled. You could be
Mhm.
able-bodied and like, be well. I mean, that's actually really obvious. I don't know why. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think like with anything, there's levels and there's a scale of what people experience with paralysis. So some people might have a horrible life with paralysis, and some people might have an easier
Mm,
life. We live in countries that obviously value um, inclusivity and things like that. So I don't know whether our experience is always the same as other people's, but it's hard to know what that
mm.
choice would be. And I guess there's lots of different factors that would go into the choice, right?
Yeah. On that
Yeah.
note, I wanted to update everybody on the baclofen
Mhm.
situation. So, as you guys know, that are regular listeners of the podcast, I've been weaning off of baclofen, and so far I've got down to 40 milligrams a day from 120,
Mhm.
and so far it's been going really well. Like no extra muscle stiffness or spasms. But then this week, particularly, 40 milligrams seems to be the point where I'm getting a lot of tight muscle stiffness. And I think when a lot of people think about spasms, like more so like outside of the community, they think like involuntary leg movements that like kick
Yeah.
out. But what I suffer with the most is just chronic muscle stiffness. It's like my legs have rigor mortis, like when they go out like that, and it kind of like runs up my trunk as well. So it's like my lower back, I can't sort of bend forward very well. And when it
Oh,
kind of like attacks, it's just like it's like being tased. Imagine like just
yeah.
someone's like and you're like but it's just the lower body. So that muscle stiffness, that constant muscle stiffness has been like elevated this week in particular, and it's been little challenging to deal with. And it's like I've I don't know if it's to do with the back then, because like I said to you before, sometimes my spasms are just bad, whether I'm on 120 milligrams or whatever. So but this week they do seem to have become quite noticeable, like very very very
Yeah.
stiff. So I'm going to continue on another week of 40 milligrams, just because I don't want to put myself through any unnecessary
Hmm.
suffering. But yeah, other than that, it's going really well.
I have a friend that's like that too. Her leg muscles will just chronically like clench because her leg isn't moving. Like it's not like
Mm.
spasming like that. It's just clenching. So her thigh, and she has one side actually, like one side of her obliques that's chronically just like tense. And so it's
Yeah.
like pulling her spine into scoliosis. And it's really annoying when that, because I would much rather have like the type of spasms that I have where they spasm and they go away. Like it'll
Mm.
kick and it'll stop. And it allows me to have a little bit of muscle tone still, but it's not uncomfortable. And the only time that I ever had like crazy where it like wouldn't stop was like the time that I tried microdosing mushrooms, which was horrible. It was horrible. My legs were just freaking out and I couldn't do anything. And I was like, oh, if somebody had to live like this all the time, like it would just be terrible. So
Yeah.
I can totally understand why that would get really frustrating, probably, and painful. Like, like I don't know, is it painful?
Not massively. It's not. It's just this. It's very. It's mostly uncomfortable, and I guess that does come with pain. Sometimes it's. I don't really get nerve pain, although sometimes I do get nerve pain. I've noticed that it's not really pain. It's more. It feels like muscle stiffness. It feels like my legs are trying to like grip the wheelchair.
Hmm.
But when I feel the muscles, they're not actually tense. So it's kind of like this false muscle tense feeling,
Oh,
which manifests as like nerve pain. But
ah,
then, yeah, they do. So my legs, my lower back and my thighs, they go, and then my adductors, so my legs cross over. And then if it gets really bad, my feet like contort a little bit and just sort of like spaz up. It's like, yeah, they're kind of like
yeah,
this, like, so it's not, so it's really, really, when they're really bad, it's very, very, very unpleasant. And then every now and then they will like, like do like the kick out and
yeah,
stuff like that. Um, and then sometimes they'll just bounce on the wheelchair.
yeah,
So, but those sort of spasms aren't. I don't suffer with that much. It's the stiffness, like it's that sort of like if they're
yeah,
bent and they go from like this angle to like more than about there, then they just go dong and just
yeah,
and then yeah, and then I have to grab them behind the knee and just sort of like squeeze it,
yeah.
and so it kind of like falls down. But yeah, you probably relate to that a little bit. Do you ever get that sort of stiffness or?
I do get that like extension. And it will happen like when I like just as an example, like when I'm transferring onto the toilet and I slide my butt to the end of my chair, my right leg, because that's the only one, my other leg will do it too if I'm laying down, but my right leg does the extension spasm a lot. And so it'll straighten out entirely. And then I have to wait till that stops for me to be able to like transfer. Otherwise, it's really weird transferring with your legs just straight out. So yeah, I get that when I'm moving like positions, when I'm transferring or if I'm trying to like put my shoes on or something like that. But yeah, it's definitely it's like a blessing and a curse because it keeps your legs sort of tone, your muscle tone there.
Mm,
It allows you to maintain metabolic tissue, which is good for being able to eat more. It's good for blood flow. It's actually good for bone density, even though you're not weight bearing, but your muscles pull on your bones to a certain extent
hmm.
and allow them to sort of get the feedback that they need to keep the calcium inside your bones. So spasticity is just sort of a blessing and a curse with a spinal cord injury. And you, like you say, you have to manage the, like you have to take some medication if it's totally unbearable, and manage the discomfort, but also not just take too much. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think also the fact that I've got muscle mass because I don't have a lot of atrophy gives me a better chance against pressure sores, you know?
Yes.
So I'm not just sat on the bones. Yeah, someone in the comments just saying
Yeah,
that
I'm
they
just
had
reading
those
that.
type of spasms, but they got a baclofen pump. The thing is about a baclofen pump, like I've been kind of offered it, but then I don't think my spasms are that bad to justify the pump, like to justify the surgery, to justify the secondary complications that come with the baclofen pump. I just think that, yeah, I would rather just deal with them. I think sometimes
Yeah.
it'd be amazing. Like I think I've mentioned to this on the podcast before. It's a little embarrassing to talk about, but after orgasm, my legs are like completely flaccid, and I'm just like, oh my god, this must be what a baclofen pump's like. I can just lob them around. It's the absolute dream. Like I've got no stiffness in the lower back. I can just like I can move around. Like I was like, oh my god, this like, if you know, forget the cure for paralysis, just give me these like floppy legs, and it would be like, you know, this would be the dream. So yeah, that's the.
But it's not the dream though, because I have a friend who has zero spasticity whatsoever, and it's awful. She's broken so many bones. She has no muscle mass whatsoever on her legs, her butt. She's had multiple pressure sores. Her legs are just they have no support for the joints or anything. Like her legs are literally just noodles, and it's like it's pretty terrible. Like I wouldn't want that. So I think, like I said, there has to be a balance. You have to take enough medication that you're comfortable, but you can't take too much that it's taking away all of the benefits of the spasticity kind of thing. You just have to make sure that it's at the level where you're not going crazy, right? It's like people that don't take bladder medication, like that stops their bladder spasms, and that like just pee
On that
themselves all
note,
day.
my bum's wiggling like crazy.
I know, I saw you. I was like, you're peeing more than I normally do.
I went
How
before
often
we started.
did you?
Yeah.
Do you drink coffee in the oh no, it's not even the morning for you. It's in the evening. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, normally in the morning I drink a lot, so I pee a lot, but for some reason I'm okay this session. Normally by the end of it I have to pee a lot. Okay, well I'm just going to go through here talking about some of these comments. Thoughts on Neuralink. I think in theory Neuralink is awesome. It's like a Wi-Fi router for your brain to your paralyzed parts. In actual practice, I think it's a little scary. I definitely don't want to volunteer to be one of the guinea pigs.
I would.
Would you?
Oh, hell yeah. That would be amazing. I'd love that.
I'll let you do it, and then once it's safe, I might do it. I don't know, because like
Have you
my
seen
legs are
the guy who did it?
no.
Oh,
Tell
he
me
was on
about
the
it.
he was on Joe Rogan. So I listened to him on the podcast. He's like a high level quad, and he plays video games with his mind. It's like really cool. He's like, yeah, it's like he says it's amazing. Like it's very intuitive. So all the brain.
But he's not paralyzed?
No, he's fully paralyzed. Yeah.
Oh, but the Neuralink wasn't to like help him not be paralyzed?
The Neuralink is to help him operate his computer.
See, I think if Neuralink can like, you know, bridge the gap between your spinal, like that's what I thought the promising like aspect of it was, or at least that's what I heard. You know, like if they have like one part of it below your spinal cord injury and one part of it above your spinal cord injury, then you can send brain messages essentially to the computer part that's below your spinal cord injury, and your legs will work, which I think is very like cool and might someday be a thing that could cure paralysis. But like I said, I'm gonna wait for all the kinks to get worked out.
So my thoughts are, what you're talking about is the neural shunt, and I think that's what.
Oh,
so they put one up here, and then they put one below your injury, and then they use Bluetooth to like send the signals. And I think that is a really promising thing that I think is going to help. But this guy, it's like the early version. It's the first ever human trial. I can't remember what his name is. Noah, maybe. Anyway, he's like a high level quad. He uses a chair, but basically he can control everything with his mind. So because he's completely paralyzed, right? So he plays video games. He like can like use his phone, send
Oh,
messages, like control his wheelchair, like everything, like with his brain, like sort of like a Professor X kind of like special. Yeah, it's
yeah, that's
really,
pretty
really
cool.
cool.
Especially for people that are like, really high level quadriplegics. Just reminded me to take my baclofen. I
There
just
you go.
realized, how long ago has it been? What? 11 hours? That can't be right. I took it this morning, I thought. Maybe I didn't. I thought I took my pills this morning. Let me check. Yeah, I took mine. I have a timer on mine.
There was also another comment I wanted to.
If anybody's
Oh yeah,
curious,
just this
I
one. It
have
just
these.
says
Go ahead.
someone saying that he or she does not want someone in a wheelchair is really rude,
Yeah.
and I wonder if it does not, if it violates any anti-discrimination laws. Well, I realized that was just like a kind of linguistic slip where I, because basically what they actually said was the role involves things that like you wouldn't be able to do as a wheelchair user. Like you would need to show clients around chalets that aren't wheelchair accessible.
Oh,
Yeah, I've like internalized that as, oh yeah, they said they didn't want someone in a wheelchair, so that's the way I applied for a job, and they said they didn't want someone in a wheelchair. That's interesting how I've like, that's how my brain has compartmentalized that, where there's more nuance to that. It's really weird, isn't it?
yeah. Yeah. It's that's what it feels like though. It feels like they're saying they don't want somebody in a wheelchair, even though they're saying it in a more politically correct way.
I
There's
was
this.
really disappointed though, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
They were like, Morzine Central office-based job. I'm like, well, yeah, office-based job. Anyway,
Yeah, that kind of sucks. This comment, Fred, did Permobil ever publish the podcast you did with them? Are you talking about the one on sex?
I did,
Uh,
yeah.
but
You did it. You
they,
did it. You did it as
I
well,
did it
right?
as well. Yeah, they did publish it. I can't.
Can you
It's
remember what
called
it's called?
Love with a Disability or something like that. Love and
Yeah.
Disability, maybe.
Yeah,
I can't
Permobil.
remember.
We both did those. We did those episodes. Yeah, I remember. I was like really over caffeinated, and I was not happy with the recording because I was like really. I don't know. I didn't speak clearly or well enough. They sent me to. Remember, they sent me to a recording studio in
Yeah,
Geneva,
me too.
and it was
Yeah.
really posh. It was really nice, and I was like, oh, I'd just feel more comfortable at home. Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, I wasn't super happy with my recording either, but I never am articulate, so it was just another one of my rambly days like today. So, it's fine. But you are normally very articulate. My husband is like very like he's like, "Oh, he just talks so awesome." And then Jamie listened to one of our lives and she was just like, "He's got the best voice." Like,
Oh, that's very
thanks.
sweet.
I have that stark contrast to my inarticulate voice, apparently.
Yeah. So yeah, I remember doing that podcast, and I remember thinking like when they were questioning me, they were trying to like weave a narrative, and I was
Yeah.
like, just tell me what narrative you want me to say, and like
Yeah.
I'll kind of go with it if you know what I mean. But they were like trying to sort of coax me down a direction. I think it was like something to do with like my masculinity or something, and I was like, oh, like what? I don't know. I was just really confused, and I remember listening back and like, oh no, that was awful. Ugh. So I don't ever like brag about that I've been on that podcast because I don't really like what. And also, it's very very personal. Like the stuff that I was talking about was very intimate. So yeah.
Yeah, they definitely wanted to like dig into like the most intimate parts, which is fine. But yeah, it was interesting because like I definitely felt like they were like they had like a story they wanted to tell, but I find that's from being in the show Push. Like it's very show businessy. Like they'll come
Mm.
up with a narrative, they'll pick people that they think, can highlight parts of that narrative. And then they'll interview them or they'll ask them to be on the show or whatever. And I find that that's a lot of time what happens when a show is produced like in advance and then they pick specific players that they think are going to be able to like be on certain teams. Oh, this one talks about like this, and they probably cherry picked our content for those narratives, but
Mm.
yeah,
I
not sure.
felt really flattered that they asked. Did you feel that way? I was like, oh yeah, I've been picked.
I totally did. And it's like a big brand. So I
Yeah.
thought that was cool. Speaking of brands, I wanted to ask people, I don't know how many people are watching, 32 people are watching, but the brand that I did the bath chair review for, they invited me to to host a giveaway over Thanksgiving, and they have a bunch of different products. So I thought I would ask you guys what would be the most useful product to give away. They have bath chairs like the one that I was using. They have um, lightweight electric scooters. They have foldable electric scooters. They have lightweight electric travel wheelchairs that are power. They don't have anything. They do have a manual wheelchair, but it's crappy. Like it's not one that somebody would use. It might be something somebody would use that wasn't in a wheelchair full time. But so yeah, if you had to pick between like a lightweight foldable scooter, a bath lift chair type thing, they have walkers too, or like a lightweight foldable electric wheelchair. Um, what would you choose? If you just weigh in the comments, then I'll see if there's any preferences.
What would you
And then
choose?
I was gonna go with the lightweight, like foldable travel power chair, because I know the power chairs are 400 pounds, and this one is like 69 pounds or something like that. Like it's really light, and
Mm,
it can fold up, it can go on an airplane easily. And I have some friends that need power chairs that use these travel wheelchairs, and they're really life changing.
mm.
So that's the one that I was gonna go with because I thought it would be the thing that somebody might get the most use out of. But it really depends because if somebody likes taking baths, then the bath chair might be, but the electric wheelchair is also a more expensive giveaway kind of thing. So,
Mm.
but they just said like, which one would you like to give away? So I was like, oh, I'll just ask, but it doesn't look like
Nice.
anybody's weighing in, so I'll just pick. But um
Well,
yeah,
they can listen. A lot of people listen after the live, so
yeah, totally weigh in if you're listening to this after. Oh yeah, lightweight electric foldable wheelchair or scooter. The last thing that I want to talk about, and I want to talk about this just briefly because I messed up my shoulder exercising and trying to do too much cleaning the basement for Jacob's birthday party. So I wanted to ask you your experience with like dealing with chronic pain,
mm,
and how that relates to your physical activity, fitness, sort of all that stuff. And I read this quote recently that said, you can either be fit and in pain, or you can either be unfit and in pain. So I've been using that lately to maintain my level of workouts and physical fitness because whether you're in pain or not, it's way better to be strong and have pain if you're going to have pain anyway. So I wanted to
mm.
ask your opinion on that and see if there's like a level for you, or where that line is.
You're talking about shoulder pain in
Shoulder
general.
pain, just chronic pain in general. Like if you're
Yeah.
have back pain, carpal tunnel, tendonitis, like I've dealt with all of that over the years,
Mm,
neck pain, shoulder pain, and how you balance physical activity that's going to maintain your strength over the long term, strength and mobility, and then, not kind of overdoing it.
mm. That's a good question. Like I get shoulder pain in this shoulder, and then but it was in in this shoulder. Like, but I'm lucky enough that I get to see a physio like quite
Mhm.
often. Again,
Yeah.
another asset, from my disability. And to be honest, living here in France, I get to see a physio very regularly. So yeah, I'm just like, oh, this shoulder hurts, and then it got better, and now this shoulder like hurts a little bit. But I try not to overwork it. Like I go swimming very regularly. I was swimming just before I came on air, which was nice. I go to the gym, so I lift weights. I do like resistance work. So I try and like build a lot of muscle. I've got a hand cycle, but there are certain activities which I find hurt my shoulder, and I try and avoid those. And one of them is actually pushing the wheelchair long distances.
Hmm.
I find that is like something I try to avoid. But like other than that, like I can do it, but like I'm just like, oh, it's a different kind of pain. When you're like lifting heavy weights above your head, you're like, oh, I'm getting stronger. Whereas when you're doing this for ages, you're like, oh, doesn't feel like like it's not like the right type of burn. You're like, oh, this feels like I'm doing my shoulders in
Strain.
rather than yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can think basically just try and recognize, like to pay attention, like listen to your body if you're doing something that you feel like is damaging your shoulders. Stop it, and then you can do like lots of exercises like with resistance bands to strengthen like specifically the
Yeah.
rotator cuff, which is a really important muscle, which is which can be like the weakest one in the shoulder. So yeah, I think just shoulder care is really important. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does answer my question. I was just curious what your sort of take on that was and how you experienced that. But I really loved that quote that, and it was about aging. So it was about being old and being in pain, because they basically said you can be old and strong and in pain, or you can be old and weak and in pain, and you're going to be in pain either way. So you may as well be strong and in pain, right? And I was like, oh, that's such a good quote for people in wheelchairs, because I know so many people who, to save their shoulders, they don't do a lot of the things that are actually going to maintain their strength and mobility. And having muscle around your shoulder joint and around your like elbow joints and like anywhere that you're getting sort of overuse is more beneficial than not having enough muscle, because then your tendons are going to take more of the brunt of the activities, as well as your joints and stuff. So I've been using that a lot, but I think I like overdid it. I think I was like, it's okay, I'm going to push through the pain, because I did like a spin class, like a virtual spin class in my hand cycle. And it was an hour and a half, and they did a pyramid. It's like a pyramid workout where you start where it's like super easy, and then you get shorter breaks, and then you go up to like just a 10-second like push with like the hardest resistance ever. And at first I was like, ooh, my shoulders, like, it hurts a little bit, but then it like loosened up. And then I think like I had so much adrenaline that I couldn't feel any pain whatsoever. So I was just like, yeah, this is awesome. And then I woke up this morning and I was like, I can't move. It was like terrible.
You sound like the classic person who's just got a gym membership. They go in the gym like, yeah. They go mad. They're like, yeah, this is sweet. No muscle soreness. And then the next day they're like, ah.
That's exactly what I was like. At the whole time, I was like, I think I need to work out more. Like, it's
also
just...
like, because you're in a spin class and they're like the spin, they go, come on, let's go, let's go. And you're like swept up in the group's energy and you're like, yeah, let's go. And then the next day you're like, shit, no, I should have taken it easy.
I know, it was like, it was not good, but I should have stopped at 45 minutes, because you can stop at the top of the pyramid. Like when you've hit the hardest part, you can stop. But then I'm like, I've already did the hardest part. I can come all the way down. But what I was like failing to remember is that like you have to go down the pyramid. So you're still at like the highest levels of exertion for like half of the pyramid. And then you go down to like the easy thing. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that's really hard to manage, is deciding how much activity to do to not stress your shoulders out. But I talked to my physio, and he basically said you're at the age and point in your disability where shoulder hygiene exercises are a non-negotiable every single day in order to maintain the joint mobility. Because he said you have to move the ball in the joint all the time in order for it not to get like those contractures kind of thing, like where it gets stuck at different areas and whatnot. So yeah, I'm gonna try and come up with a routine for that. That's like, he gave me all the exercises, but I'll try and make a video about it and do like this is how I felt.
There's a video on Ben's channel, like, do you know Adapt to Perform?
Yeah.
He's got a shoulder care. In fact, I've actually made a shoulder care video ages ago.
Really? I'll go watch yours then.
Well, yeah, mine or his. I think I probably stole some stuff off of his. I think, yeah, I don't know. I think I saw a few things on Instagram as well. But yeah, like there's lots of resistance bands exercises and stuff, which is really good. Yeah, check out mine. I forgot I did that ages ago. Yeah,
I'm gonna go check it out. Cool. Well, I think we're over, but yeah.
We are indeed. It's been fun. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and listening to us waffle on today.
Sorry for being so inarticulate. I woke up late and was tired, so my brain was just turning on when I started the live.
Yeah, it's really nice. Thanks for sharing the video of Jacob boxing. It was really cool to see, to like get inside the mind of a parent. You know, like it's a really interesting thought experiment to have. You know, to like let them, you know, leave the nest, and you're like, shit, you know, like take care. Because my mum said she was going to watch live today. Say hi, mum, if you're there. She always worries about me, and like now I'm 42, and I'm like, oh, for God's sake, mum. My accident didn't help, you know what I mean? But she's always worrying about me, and yeah, she says you'll understand one day when you're a parent, and I'm like, because I'm not a parent, I'm like, yeah, whatever. But then when I hear your stories, I'm like, yeah, it's probably true. I will understand. It's
100% true. I always thought it would be easier having like older kids, but it's not. It's just a different set of like worries and things. And now that Jacob's 16, I'm like, oh my God, like what's he going to do for a job? And how's he going to support himself? And now I'm starting to worry about like those kinds of things when I'm just like, but yeah, it's fun being a parent. So don't
How
get
do
mad at your
you?
mom for worrying about you, because your mom is
Nah.
never going to stop.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Will it ever stop? That's what I always think, and
No,
the answer is
never.
no. I was actually just one more question before we go. How
Yeah.
does it make you feel about your accident, like knowing that your mum went through seeing you get paralyzed and stuff? Have you ever thought about it like that?
I do think a lot about that now that I am a parent. And I actually am going to interview my family members individually about their perspective on the day I was paralyzed, just to see like what that was like. And I
Mm,
have done personal like conversations with them about what it felt like. But it's a different perspective watching your daughter get paralyzed. And I think like one of the things that helped my family cope with my injury, which is a very, very sad thing to have helped them cope with it, is
mm,
that somebody died in the
mm,
accident. And so I remember my grandpa like telling me that like he was in the hospital and he saw the police tell Blake's parents that he had died, and his
mm,
mom was freaking out. And he said, like, I just had to know whether you were alive or dead. So he just got up and like walked into like the emergency room area and saw me on all these monitors, but the like it was like beeping and my heart was beating and stuff. And then he came out and was like, she's alive. Sorry, I'm gonna cry.
mm.
But just
Yeah.
thinking about that day, that was all that like my family needed. And from that point on, everything was gratitude, right? So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's such a poignant reminder of yeah, like that comparison. It's yeah, that must have been really tough, man.
Yeah, a really tough thing. And like I say, it's not something that I'm should be grateful. I don't feel gratitude for the fact that somebody died in my accident, but I do feel gratitude for the fact that I'm alive
Mm,
today and get to experience all the things that life has to offer. Um, and I remember like that is something that keeps me going on a daily basis, is that like I get these challenges, I get
mm.
to have them. So yeah, I think for my mom, that was part of her ability to cope and be like, "Oh my god, I'm so glad my daughter's just paralyzed," right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that must have helped a lot. Wow,
Yeah.
what an interesting. Yeah, very
My
interesting.
my anniversary of my accident is coming up in less than a month, so
No way. That video will be good. I tell you what, like doing that video of like that'll make a great, all those interviews side by side.
yeah, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna piece it together because I haven't really thought about how I'm gonna like piece all the interviews together, but I
Oh,
definitely
I've got an idea for you if you want. Do you remember the video that I did? It's called Through the Lens of Friends, where I asked all my friends and family the same four questions, and then I edited it together creatively. So it's like, like I think it was like,
Hmm.
how do you know me? What's your favorite story about me? Where were you when you
Oh,
heard
that's
about my
such a good
accident?
idea. That's a
And what
great
do you think
idea.
about me now? And there
I love
were,
that.
yeah, it's a really great video. It's one of my favorite videos. I did it when I went back to Southampton for my 40th birthday. So it was my 40th birthday, and everyone was in the park. And throughout the week where I was at home, I
Yeah.
interviewed loads of people, and then I stitched it all together. And it's a like for me, like it wasn't very popular, I guess, just because I've got a small channel, but for me it was like a beautiful video that I crafted, and I made it a gift for my mum's birthday as well, which gave me motivation to edit it because I was sat on the footage for so long, and I was like, I've really got to edit that together. I'll do it for my mum's birthday. And it was just such a lovely, like warm-hearted
Yeah.
collection of lovely stories and things said about me, so it was really cool.
Yeah, I'm totally stealing that idea. Like where you ask the same question and then like you ask the question and then all of the answers to it are edited together with the different people.
Yeah, there's some
Yeah, I
really
watched
funny
that
bits as
video.
well.
Now that you say that, I watched that video because I'm
Yeah, yeah.
like I'm remembering vaguely the park that you were in and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I'll drop
Yeah.
the video in the comments because
Okay.
if anyone's listening and they want to see it, it's a really lovely little tribute to myself. I think that's why I was struggling editing it, because it was like I did it for myself for my 40th birthday. I thought but like dedicating it to my mum was the kick that made me do it, because it was really quite a bit of an ego stroke, really. Like, hey, everyone, like say lovely things about me, and I'll edit them together myself. Like this is your life.
But that's such like what we don't give ourselves the opportunity to do that enough. I think that's one of the things that's sad about our like humanity in general, is that like we don't take the time to celebrate ourselves ever. And we really should. Like, we take the time to criticize ourselves a whole heck of a lot. But we don't take the time to appreciate the good things that people think about us. And I think that's sad because we do it at somebody's funeral.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
half the time we don't talk about what we love about somebody when they're, alive to appreciate it. So don't feel bad about it. I think it was a great video idea and I'm totally stealing it.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. Well, yeah, do it. I'll send it to you. I'll put it in the
Okay.
link in the description. Anyway, thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much, Brittney. This has been fun. Thanks for sharing. And we will see you next week.
See you guys.
Bye.